We say 2013, end of the first spiritual year after the grand alignment. Most of you experienced a certain enhancement of the process that you are undergoing during that period, particularly December, January 2012, 2013. And during that time, with so many energy centres lining up in this particular solar system and galaxy, and indeed the universe, there was a huge opportunity to release. To let the past go, so that you can move forward relatively unencumbered and embrace the potential which lays before you. For most of you, you experienced that period as a series of moments when things fell away relatively easily, and you felt renewed, re-energised, perhaps even restored, perhaps even repaired, rejuvenated. Yet, as the energy of the alignment waned, you allowed the conscious mind, with its doubting, with its need to think that it knows something. And remember, the animal owns the conscious mind. The animal is the thinker. You, even as a soul, certainly not as a spirit, you do not have a mind. The mind belongs to the animal thing that you indwell, that you live within. That's why I say consulting the mind about anything to do with the ascension process is the height of folly, because it's part of the animal. And having your little mental guru asking the animal that you live in, is this okay? Does this make sense? Are you okay with this? Just makes you an idiot, basically, because you're fully and completely in those moments identifying with the body mind, with the animal and the ego. And in doing so, most of you simply reinstalled the old patterns, went into fear, because with so much falling away around that time, there was an emptiness within. And for some of you, perhaps you felt that emptiness within and then just used all of the tools and all of the skills that you've learnt to fill that emptiness with love. But for most of you, you filled it with fear, and as a consequence, simply reinstalled and re-energised the old patterns. And this is the way. This is what happens when you identify with the ego and you let the conscious mind run the show. The conscious mind is part of the animal. The thinker is the animal. The thinker is not you. The thinker is the animal. And the only part the animal plays in this process is to learn, through your stewardship, to learn to allow itself to be at one with Spirit. You as the indwelling Spirit must learn how to wisely, compassionately lead your form life, lead your experience as a human being. You must make sure that the human being is well equipped, well provisioned, well trained and well led, so that it is able to be the servant of Spirit, in, of and for love, and serves to all it is. Really, that's what the process of supporting an ascended consciousness is all about. Constantly referring to the conscious mind, thinking about the process. It's just believing you are a body-mind. Which is really no different to you driving your car, believing you are the car and the car is in control. The car is not in control. You are the driver. And the only constraints you have placed upon you are the limitations associated with the vehicle itself, which can be enhanced and improved, and as all of you know. So what I would hope for you over this couple of weeks is that you reclaim as much ground as you possibly can. That you could have maintained and held through the alignment. To hold as much of that as you possibly can, ongoingly, feelingly, to know it to be your truth, to know it to be your experience, and that you have the wherewithal, the courage as a spiritual being to demonstrate to the body-mind, to the animal that you indwell, that it can trust you enough to yield to your leadership, to your stewardship, in, of and for love, in service to all that is. So that's what my hope, our hope is. To feel that and to know that fully, wholly. That's what that word originally meant too, not the way holy has become like holier than thou. It means wholeness, to be in wholeness, to be in oneness, to be wholly in the experience as a living human spirit, a spot within the macrocosm through which energy is focused, a conscious conductor of living energy, and indeed to be that energy as spirit. In these modern times, so many of the fundamental tenets of the ascension process are completely misunderstood because we live in a material age where the mind is worshipped, where hedonism, when seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, is the way that society is structured and the way that the good life is marketed to you. And so much of life is seen to be about living the good life, living whatever your understanding of the good life is. And that may mean that you set yourself apart and you hide from the world for whatever reason, or it may be you fully engage in it blindly with no barriers and no boundaries to that which is unholy or lacking in wholeness, what some perhaps would call evil. Both are foolish, because this experience is about experience. To be as a human being is all about to experience and to learn and to make mistakes. If you make a mistake that binds the life for life, well, there's always another life. We live in a world where people would have you believe that there is but one life, and that of course is ridiculous to anyone who has actually investigated life wholly, whether it be the scientist who understands that energy is neither created or destroyed, it simply changes form, or anyone who's through the process of introspection or supplication or meditation who has come to an understanding of themselves to be, or even a near-death experience. People come to an understanding that they are not the body-mind and they exist independently, feelingly, beyond and independently of the body-mind. So no need to go into that nonsense. So to experience fully and completely, but about love, motivated about love, to make choices of love, one choice of love after another, unashamedly, without apology, to live and engage the culture of love as a human being. That is the path which leads to self-actualization of the human spirit. So that's what this is about. So from the coaching perspective, you must be coached to come to an understanding of where you choose fear, of how you limit yourself by choosing fear. Guided to learn to feel into the path that lays ahead of you within time and space, and to get a sense of which choices need to be made which are going to eventuate in the greatest actualization of love, the greatest actualization of wisdom, and the greatest actualization of compassion in your life, but not just within your life. The decisions, the choices which will lead you to a position where you become the greatest influence within the greatest personal sphere that you may develop. The greatest influence within that sphere of love and wisdom and compassion. Because if there is a goal within this process, it's not the acquisition of love, or the acquisition of wisdom, or the acquisition of compassion. It is to share that. Far too many commit themselves to the spiritual path and become spiritual misers, and it's all just about me, which is just a higher form of hedonism. And I will not engage with the world which is profane. I will judge, and I will ferociously project at the infidels because I am in my spiritual pride and I am better than because I'm on the spiritual path. That's not the way of spirituality, because the word spirit means to love. Spirituality is about being the greatest source of love and wisdom and compassion that you can possibly be, and then sharing that with others to your fullest possible potential, to your greatest potential. And that is where the joy is. And ultimately, as you move through the process, the great portal into, the great shift into truly embracing oneness with universal consciousness. You go through an experience where suffering and joy become one. Suffering and joy become one. So I hope that over the next 10 days or so you'll come to a much greater understanding of what that actually means. And get a feel for how and where that lays ahead of you. I want to teach you how to guide yourself towards that point of tension, that juxtaposed resolution of duality, which creates an alchemical doorway which allows you to enter into an experience of oneness with your universal source, your source within this universe, with no intermediaries, just your relationship with your universal source. So I want to help you to come to an understanding of how you may allow your energy to flow forward of you and to be able to sense ahead of you the decisions that you need to make, the steps that you need to take in your life, which will take you closer to this doorway, which will cause you to have this experience of suffering and joy to become one.
When I experience that suffering and joy together.
Yep. Yeah. There's a kind of suffering which is sort of art for art's sake, which is self-imposed limitation for its own sake, playing small, but there is this experience of willingly choosing and willingly allowing yourself to embrace the inevitable outcome and consequence of past choice, to embrace the experience in such a way which you just know is liberating you as a human spirit. So regardless of what it moves beyond pleasure or pain, you just go into this experience of, wow, this is kind of crappy, but I also know that I'm cleaning up my own mess, and I just know, I'm not thinking, I just know and I feel that I am moving towards the experience of liberation as a human spirit in form. You can indeed.
Locked and trapped, and it's a nice feeling.
Anyone else? Cam?
I was sitting here pondering that I'd never actually felt that connection to calling it suffering, but it's actually really sitting quite nicely. It's it's just that that process of, it just feels so right to be, like falling into that and allowing the depth and the expansiveness of that feeling, and allowing it to transcend. I can see the suffering that's there. It's just the exquisiteness of it.
Yeah, you can't support an ascended consciousness if you have this constant aversion to suffering.
Yeah.
So you're going to be making choices based on attempting to not suffer, to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Yeah. That's not the path to self-actualization. Not to say that this path to self-actualization is all about suffering, but there was going to be a certain amount of the ego suffering because of the consequences of its own actions, and that must be embraced joyfully. And ultimately, within that context, joy is a choice. People say, oh, I'm scared and I can't help it. Well, that's bullshit. That is complete nonsense. Danger is real. Danger is real. That's a real thing. Fear is the way you choose to respond to danger, or what you perceive danger to be. That's entirely your choice. So certainly danger is something which is real and ever present in the world, and wisdom will allow you to navigate your way through and around dangerous situations through the actualization of love, which is called wisdom. Danger is a real thing, but fear is a choice. Fear is a choice. You can either react in fear, like a stupid, cornered animal, or you can respond to danger in love and just go, oh, here's some danger, what am I going to do about it? That's entirely your choice. If you are reacting in fear, in any way, shape or form in your life, that means that you are identifying with the body-mind, you're identifying with the animal and believing you are the animal. If you find yourself responding to danger with love, okay, oh, well, this is something that's happening. Okay, well, how do I navigate my way through this or around this? That's in large part the measure, the gauge of how much spirit is active in your life in the driver's seat. Danger is ever present, but how you react to it or respond to it, out of fear, out of love, is entirely your choice. What people call suffering is also ever present in the world. In any world where you have free will, in any sphere where you have the free will experience, where there is entropy, where there is resistance which you must work against in order to build character, there is going to be this experience of suffering. So suffering is ever present in the world. However, pain is not something which is a part of the experience of suffering. People say pain is resistance to change. In a way, that's true. Two people undergo the same experience. Anyone would agree that it's suffering, yet one person experiences enormous pain through that process and another person finds it to be liberating, finds it to be this wonderful, enlightening, joyful experience. So that is very much the attitude, the disposition of the indwelling entity. Whether or not the indwelling entity identifies itself as being the body-mind, loses itself in the nonsensical going around in circles of the conscious mind, which can talk itself in and out of anything, or you identify as spirit, and this is happening, and this is what I'm experiencing, and now this is happening, and this is what I'm experiencing. And some people would call it suffering, but it's just what I'm experiencing. Pain is a choice also. If you have an injury of some kind, and you resist and you judge that injury, it hurts like hell. It's extremely painful. If you, on the other hand, have an injury and you simply allow it and you do not judge it, and you surround the injury with love and nurturing healing forces, it still hurts as part of your awareness that you have an injury, but it's not painful. It's pain-free. So the experience of suffering, how you embrace the experience of suffering. When you find yourself suffering, do you just go, well, all right, this is something that I'm going to reject and I'm going to push away and I'm going to go and seek pleasure instead of this very painful experience, because that's what the stupid, ignorant body-mind does? Or as the indwelling spirit, you go, okay, well, all suffering is the karmic cause and effect, choice and consequence. It's the consequence of choices that I've made, And I know better now. I'm going to choose to embrace this opportunity to clear this conflicted energy or convoluted energy or misplaced energy in the time continuum. I'm going to choose to transmute that, to transform that. And then I am going to simply move on to the next experience. You don't drag it out. The more you try to resist something which is perceived to be suffering or pain, the more you drag the experience out, you'll find that these things pass relatively quickly if you simply choose to embrace the experience in love, in a willingness to accept that the suffering that you're now undergoing is the inevitable consequence of your past action. And this is simply an opportunity to demonstrate spiritual maturity and to move forward, not in a melodramatic way or, like it's been distorted by religion, by, I suffer to be holy. It's not about that, but, certain things that you do. When you cause, out of fear-based choices, to set energy in motion which is limiting and constricting and contracting and causing energy not to evolve and move forward, then ultimately that's going to produce suffering in some way in your life. So what you would term suffering is simply an opportunity to review but not reclaim the past and to come to a greater understanding of how to approach your life in the future in a way which is about spiritual mastery rather than embracing the fear-based attitude to life which is of the ego. So one must move beyond this idea of, life, it's about the good life, and success for me is all about living the good life, and the good life is about maximising pleasure and seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, because that's how an ego does it, that's how an animal does it, that's not the way of spiritual mastery. But it's not all about suffering, but it is about willingly embracing the consequences of your use of energy in past moments as you move forward, and navigating your way through that by feeling into the future where you feel the most potential for joy and suffering to become one. Like Jenny shared that experience of, oh wow, okay, I feel a certain amount of resistance from the body, mind, from the animal, but I'm going to choose to move forward in this direction because I know that this is an opportunity to clean up my own mess. This is an opportunity to move forward on the spiritual path. And as you do so, there may be a certain amount of suffering, which is potentially painful or uncomfortable. But it isn't painful or uncomfortable because you embrace it lovingly. So you have this experience of joy and suffering becoming one. But ultimately when you exhaust, and you will exhaust, the flow, the tide of potential suffering which is following you around, which you're very skillfully trying to avoid, once you make that choice to willingly embrace that, and to clear that, you are going to, over a period of time, reach a point where you have cleared that. And that's a really important, like landmark quantum shift in the experience on the spiritual path, where that tide of potential suffering is no longer following you around and creating karma, in that it's creating your life circumstances because you are not willing to just face let's say, the mistakes of the past where you've chosen fear rather than love, within the context of the spiritual path, which is all about love, you could say that's a mistake. Instead of just embracing that and going, okay, I just choose to work through this, and rather than trying to avoid that and run away from that, you just go, okay, I'm going to accept this, I'm going to work through this. Okay, the next period of time for me, however long that is about clearing that tide of potential suffering behind me. And you just see it as a stepping stone towards liberation. When you ultimately reach that point, you reach a kind of spiritual maturity which leads you to be immune to the experience of painful suffering. And that is a profound quantum shift in the experience of the ascension process. So we're all working towards that, and I hope that this coming couple of weeks is going to assist you with that. Most of you have a lot to let go of and a lot to stop avoiding. So we need to look at helping you to clear the mechanisms that you use to avoid potential suffering, and on the other side of the coin to look at how you can stop this activity of judging that when it's coming up, and the fact that you feel it behind you. Because that experience of that tide of potential suffering behind you, if you choose to avoid that, what it actually means is that that tide of potential suffering behind you is unconsciously creating your life experience and your life circumstances. So there's no way that you can be in mastery if that's the case. So you must exhaust that behind you so that it's no longer, if this is what they say to be liberated in the way that you are freed from the wheel of earth karma. Right? That's what they mean when people speak about that experience. So we're going to be doing a lot of work over the next couple of weeks towards that, in the hope that it will allow you to reclaim as much of that spontaneous experience of taste of enlightenment that you had around the grand alignment. So that's where we're at, and that's what we're working towards. So I'm going to be doing a big clearing tonight to initiate that, and Seg will be continuing that process tomorrow of looking at clearing your denial and embracing that tide of potential suffering. And you can have been in high-level spiritual leadership for many lifetimes and still have quite a lot of this tide of potential suffering behind you, because the way that you've tried to impose spirituality on people actually disempowered them. You know, so just because you perhaps, but I couldn't possibly have that because I've been, a monk or a nun or a guru or whatever, lots of lifetimes. Well, just because you've been doing that doesn't mean that you are not and have not been causing disempowerment in as far as love is concerned with people, because the way that religion has applied so-called spirituality on this planet for a long time has been largely about fear and self-contraction, and not so much about wisdom, compassion, tolerance, and the true spiritual qualities that certainly the founders of those religions were encouraging people to formalise and organise, and to create a way of disseminating and teaching a way of living that truth. The way that it's actually then been applied has often been at best a distortion, and at worst a complete perversion for the sake of power and for its own sake, a distortion and perversion of the original teachings. So just because you've been involved in the experience of the dissemination of some supposed religious truth for a long period of time doesn't mean that you haven't caused suffering, in that you have actually prevented the ongoing evolutionary process in others, because you've got them caught up in so many thou shalts and this very rigid fear of God, and this whole ridiculous idea that you only have one life and then there's a heaven or hell, which is nonsensical. to anyone who has actually ever investigated. There's going to be a lot to clean up. But like everything, the thought of it is much worse than the actual experience of it. So the real spiritual maturity lies in just simply choosing to embrace that and to experience whatever comes along, one experience after another, in, of and for love, in service to all that is. So that's what we're working on, and I hope you really choose to enjoy the process. Okay, anyone got anything they want to share?
When I'm in that process, when you're going through that, what feels a bit like suffering as you get into it, what I've just been seeing, what I actually do is I look into the future, I feel into the future, and I feel what it's going to be like, and that impels me forward.
Yeah.
Into the joy, because you get that joy from
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah, it's not suffering for suffering's sake. There is, there is an end game associated with it, because clearing this actually allows you to experience joy ongoing as a state of being. It allows you to choose without impediment the experience of joy as a state of being. Yeah, exactly.
It's nice to have the opportunity that you might be able to pick up the gains from the alignment.
Well, we'll see.
Opportunity.
One must be prepared to release habits and
expectations, I suppose, as well.
expectations.